Hello and welcome to another post-processing video. Hopefully this one's going to be a lot shorter. It's about just doing one specific thing. Now I put this image up yesterday and a couple of people asked how did you produce a circle in the background. Now it wasn't shot in the studio. The image was shot like this. It's already been retouched, but this is the basis of it. Now quite often when we have these blank images like this, they kind of look a little bit incomplete. Now normally we're using these as setup and then we're going to dial into a long exposure and we're going to blur the edges and all kinds of other things, so there will be other stuff in the background. But for these kind of setup shots, when we've got a blank background like this, or blankish, there's a little bit of haze still knocking around in the back, which has produced this nice glow from the backlight, and we've got a couple of side lights here or umbrellas producing this purple. It's an ideal opportunity to put something in, right? And you look at the light and you think, well, let's put something in that looks like it could be producing that light. And it doesn't have to be that precise, but you look here, we've got a sort of a purple edge all the way around, mostly. Not so much on the top, but it's definitely mostly around. So we can put something in the background that's roughly that color, that's going to look like it's producing that light. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. And then there's a number of ways of producing these shapes in Photoshop, and I'm going to show you one of those now. The two ways that I normally use is to just create paths and then stroke them, and then apply layer styles to it. And the other one is to use the polar coordinates process, the filter, distortion filter, to make those kind of circular, kind of abstract patterns. You can also use things like step and repeat. That's also a useful thing, so a little bit more complex to set up. But you can generate all kinds of things or build up a library of other stuff that you've shot, geometric shapes, things like that, things that you like. I'm going to show you a really simple one now, which I use in a square format like this, which is a circle. So first thing we need to do is to just generate a new layer. So it's just a new blank layer. Okay, we're not going to fill it with anything because we want to use some layer styles, and they kind of rely on having nothing else in the image but the circle that we're going to draw. Now, in order to draw the circle, we're going to draw a path with the ellipse tool, because a circle is a special case of ellipse. And to do that, with this tool, you don't hold the shift to get a circle, right? It seems to differ now from tool to tool as to whether you hold the shift or don't hold the shift to lock aspect ratio of various things. Now we're going to make it quite big, and I'm holding the space bar to sort of move it about and then releasing the space bar to adjust the size. So I want it somewhere like there, and roughly centered. Now I could be scientific about it and use the various tools in Photoshop to center it, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to do it by eye. And there we go. So now where we've got our path, now that isn't in the image, right? And obviously it doesn't look anything like what we had on the finished one. Now what we need to do is what they call stroke the path, which is to trace over the path with one of the tools. So if we look over here in the paths, there is the work path, and if you right click on there and select stroke path, you've then got the options to stroke it with any number of different tools. Now we're going to use the brush, but before we do that we need to make sure that the brush is set up correctly. So I'm going to press B for the brush tool. Now the colour I've already selected, but I'll tell you why I selected this colour. So I sampled it from there. In fact, we'll do it again. So I'll sample it from there, but there's a couple of things that I need to bear in mind, right? The light that's there has reflected off the model's skin, which is kind of more of a warm orangey sort of colour. So that's going to have affected the colour of the light. Okay, so it's going to make it warmer. So the light source is probably going to be a bit cooler than that. So we're going to knock this down till it's quite blue. Now it's also going to be brighter than that. So I'm going to knock this up to here in terms of brightness. So it's quite bright indeed, really, getting on towards white. Okay, so that's kind of where we want to be. And now we're just going to right click on here, select stroke path, the brush is selected, and it's going to draw that circle. Now Obviously we don't want the path anymore, so select any kind of path tool. So I've got the pen tool here, press escape a couple of times and it's going to deselect that path. It's still there, we can select it again if we want later on, but for now we're just going to work with the pixels that we've drawn on this layer. Now the next thing we need to do is apply some glow to it. I want it to look like it's a light source, so it's glowing. So we're going to bring up the layer styles panel and we're going to use outer glow. Now straight away it's gone for that, but we'll come back to that setting and why that was there in the first place. I'm going to set the size to be quite low and the color is already selected as well. I've gone for a sort of the most saturated version of the color that we selected for the middle, so it's a lot darker and it's a lot more saturated. And as far as this goes, we're using screen blend mode. It's full opacity. We're using the softer method of producing the glow, which I just prefer. Spread I've put to 1. If you up the spread, it just makes a harder edge, which I don't really want. In fact, I'm going to leave it on 0 for this one. And then size we're going to adjust to taste, but we're going to do this in 2 stages. So I'm going to put another one of these on in a second. So this one we're going to have quite small. Maybe a little bit smaller than that. There we go. And we're going to press OK. Right. Now to get the wider glow, I'm just going to duplicate the layer. We're going to go back into the blending options, and for this one, we're going to make the glow quite big. There it is. Okay. And so we can see that was the copy layer with the wider glow. But you can see if we just do that, the effect isn't really as dominant as if you put them both together, and that's the sort of the middle one, if you like. And I'm going to set both of these to screen, just in case. It doesn't make a lot of difference, if I'm honest. And we're going to reduce the opacity of this outer one just a little bit. So just dial that up and down to taste, and away you go. Okay, now we're going to put these in a group. Here we go, double click, and we'll call it circle. I don't normally bother naming my things because I tend to flatten my picture as I go. I know everybody's in shock and has fallen off the chairs at this point. You should end up with a layer stack about yay big in your Photoshop. But I don't do that for a couple of reasons. One is it slows the machine down. You know, I mean, this machine is 4 or 5 years old. It's got 8 cores, it's got 24 gig of RAM, it's got a 4 gig video card, it's got a 1 terabyte SSD with a swap file on. It still runs like an asthmatic donkey when it's running Photoshop sometimes. So I flatten the image for that reason. The other reason is if I left all those layers there, I'd just come back and fiddle with them again and again, and the image would never get finished. So as soon as I'm happy with something, I commit, I flatten the thing, and we move on. Sometimes that trips me up and I have to get the original image back to mend something, but it's very rare. And to be honest, I just prefer to work this way and just keep things clean down here. Now, obviously we want this to go behind the model, not in front. So we need to generate a mask for this layer. But we're not going to do that manually because that would be tedious. We're going to select the background layer. We're going to select any selection tool and then press the select subject button. And it's done a reasonable job, right? I know the circle's never going to go around this bit, so I'm not particularly bothered about that. Just around here, the arms, if I choose to sort of move it around, that'll be fine. So this selection looks good to me, so we'll make a mask out of that. So on the circle group, I want the circle to show up where the selection isn't. So we've selected the model, but I want it to show up in the non-model bits. So I'm going to hold the Alt key and press the new mask button, and it's generated me a nice mask in the shape of the model, right? Now the mask is selected, and this is important. You must not select the mask, so just click anywhere else on the layer. Okay, now if we want to move the circle about, it's kind of moving the mask as well, right? So the gap is moving, and we don't want that. So we're gonna just undo that, and unfortunately it's undone doing the mask again, so let's just redo that. There we go. So click somewhere so the mask is not selected, and make sure that you click this little chain thing here, which is going to break the link between the content of that layer and its mask. And now I can move the circle about and the mask does not move. Now you get a little bit of glow at the edges and things like that, but it tends to go away after you kind of put the thing down. If you watch the little circle spinning, okay, it's calling me a liar, but it does when you do a free transform. And that's one of the ways that we can adjust this. So we can do a free transform on this. And say if we wanted it to be smaller, then we could just drag it down. We can move it about like so, and say we want it about there, and then we can commit to that. And yes, you see these strange edges that pop up here, but then they just go away. No idea why it does that, but it's not an issue. Now, I quite like the bigger one because I want this to be on the outside of the arms to produce this sort of, or look like it's producing this light effect. So I'm going to leave it there, but I'm just going to zoom out and just look at the whole composition. And I really encourage you to do this on your images. Look at it at different zoom levels, because sometimes when you zoom out and you think, oh, it's all weighted to the left hand side, or it's all the sort of light bits are up this end, and you get a different perspective literally on the image by zooming out. So do that, and that's pretty much it, to be honest. I think the only other thing I did on the original is I didn't want it to dominate the picture, so I reduced the fill on it rather than the opacity. This has the effect, it seems to be produced dialing down the less bright bits more than the bright bits. I don't know whether that's true. I'm not a Photoshop expert. If you really want to learn about Photoshop, you should go and watch Unmesh Dinder's channel, Pix Imperfect. Okay, Pix Imperfect. Go and look him up. He's a much better presenter than me. His video quality and sound quality is a lot better. He's just much more fluent and easy to understand than my waffle. So if you really want to learn Photoshop, go and watch Pix Imperfect. I don't know exactly how these things work. I just learn enough that I need to know to get the thing done that I need to do. All right. So there we have it. There's the circle. And it kind of completes this image, right? So, you know, we can toggle that on and off. I mean, it's okay when the image is workable, but it kind of looks a little bit incomplete. You put something like that on there, maybe dial it down just a little bit more, and you're done. And there it is. So thanks for watching. I hope you found that useful, and look out for more tips and tricks and the ways that I process my image in future. I can't promise that this is going to be a regular thing, but so subscribe if you want to. More videos will probably appear at some point, but I'm not making any promises as to when. All right, thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.